Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we have the one and only Louka. Hey, how do I pronounce your last name, brother?
The way you said it, actually, the last time, you said Kurcer. And that is the correct pronunciation
Kurcer.
from Turkey, because I'm half Turkish.
Oh, for real?
Yes, I'm for real.
Merhaba abi. Do you speak Turkish?
Merhaba. Not really.
Oh, but
Love
it, man. Awesome.
But I know in Europe there's a lot of Turks, especially in Germany and maybe Switzerland as well.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, that's it's the Balkans. I mean, I have gypsy blood in my veins,
Same
here. Awesome.
Yeah, we kind of look the same a little bit.
Yeah, we're friends with everybody. That's awesome.
My grandmother was from Azerbaijan, and my father had blue eyes. Because I have blue eyes.
Yeah, you got the perfect mixture.
The Turks are dark. They have dark eyes, dark skin.
Yeah.
But I'm light.
You're light skin. Yeah.
So
once again, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Louka Kurcer. I love it that I pronounced the name right. So today, a common guest on the podcast, which of course, as you might have noticed, he's not only just a common guest, but also a friend. I consider him a brother, not only just because of the kettlebell, but because we have a lot of similarities that we're sharing. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Now, the first thing, we just dive right into it, Louka, is you mentioned this topic about breathing and that you got some education in that form. So let us know.
Yes. Breathing is one of the most interesting topics you'll ever dive into next to training your body physically. Breathing is things that we do as humans, but we're not aware of it. There's two main, you could say, categories that I want to discuss breathing. First, I want to talk about functional breathing and what that is. And then I want to talk about breathing more for performance, for training, for, you could say, also relaxation or excitation. Because the breath can be used for many things. It's just how you apply it. So first I want to discuss what is functional breathing and how can you be more functional on your day-to-day life by breathing better. If you notice people, the way they breathe, okay, they either breathe through their nose or they breathe through their mouth. And there's a big issue health-wise when people breathe through their mouth chronically, as opposed to breathing through their nose. Now, I switched to nasal breathing almost 2 years ago. I only nose breathe, and I'm aware, except when I'm talking, of course, it's faster when you breathe through your mouth. So, that, by the way, there's no right or wrong. It's not wrong to breathe through your mouth, but it's just over time, it can become very unhealthy.
Nasal breathing is, in a way, you could say, will lead to better health and performance. And this is for several reasons. Now, you have mainly three gases that you have in your body. You have the oxygen. You have oxygen in your body, you breathe air. You also have carbon dioxide. For many years, people thought carbon CO2 was a bad gas. It was like a pollution or something like that. But actually, it's very necessary for your body to absorb oxygen. And you need CO2. Your body produces CO2 naturally, actually. You get a little bit out of the air, out of the atmosphere, but you get most of it through your body's production, natural production of CO2. Okay? The other third gas is nitric oxide. And these three gases are very key in health. Now, your body's blood is already saturated with oxygen, by the way. You will have a 94 to 98% body oxygen saturation, which is this normal level. So if you hold your breath, you can hold your breath for a very long time. You could force it to hold it for a very long time, and you're gonna still be okay. You survive. Because your body already, in the blood, already has enough oxygen. The only thing is, you need CO2, a certain level in your body to access that oxygen. Otherwise, you're not gonna get it.
Wow.
CO2 is like a key. It gives you the key to open the oxygen and deliver it to your brain, to your muscle, to create energy.
Wow.
And without CO2, you will not be able to get the oxygen out of your blood, right? So in your, let's say you have what's called hemoglobin, which is a protein. And in the hemoglobin, there's oxygen. Without the CO2 necessary, your body, the hemoglobin will not release the oxygen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So people that mouth breathe, they exhale a lot, they exhale too much, and they release too much CO2. And the CO2 that they release, they don't get the oxygen because they release too much CO2. So a lot of people that mouth breathe, they get unhealthy, they get sick, and we could sort of kind of point the finger and say, this is the way they breathe. If they would change the way they would breathe, they'd be a lot healthier, they would get more energy, they would feel better, and it would increase their day-to-day performance.
Great.
So
So
it
for my
increases a lot, like sleep,
Great.
The way you fight, your immune system, because if you breathe too much, it has a higher metabolic cost. So you're spending more energy for nothing in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we teach people how to breathe better through the nose, and we do certain exercises, so they become more tolerant to CO2, if that makes more sense. So they start producing the natural levels needed to access that oxygen in their body. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just what I want to make clear is, if we are mouth breathers, we are wasting too much carbon dioxide, right?
Correct. And you inhale more air than you need. Not only that, is that mouth breathers don't really use their diaphragm very well.
Yep.
When you breathe through your nose, you access your diaphragm muscle, which makes you breathe deeper. And only deep within the lungs will the little alveolus will absorb the oxygen very well. And it's really down there that all the magic happens, as we say. So when you breathe through your nose, the air goes deeper, and you're able to access that deep lung capacity. But you have to breathe in a way that's slow, and that's light. Not fast, not many times, but slowly. Very low and light, we say. We call this light breathing, and I'll teach you some exercises if you'd like to practice.
Most definitely.
So the rate of breathing, the way we teach it is through the nose, and has to be kind of in a very slow and controlled way where you can stay relaxed and calm.
So with the tempo of breathing in and breathing out, right? So that's what you're saying with the slow tempo. So you're breathing in slowly, taking a lot of air in.
Yeah, and the thing is, doing this is going to be hard for some people. It's an exercise.
Yeah.
It's like weightlifting. If you're a beginner, you start light, start with easier exercises. Some people will struggle doing this. So we have easier things to prepare them for this. So I've been studying two main programs, which is one is, you've probably maybe heard of it, called Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McEwen. Patrick is a genius also. He's one of my mentors. And
So
also,
it's Oxygen Advantage, right?
Yes.
Right.
I highly recommend this book, and it's a course you can take. Patrick has a few books actually, but he has a main course, and you could get certified. And I'm getting certified as an instructor.
Patrick, last name?
McEwen. Yeah, very easy to find, and I'll send you some of his videos.
Great.
We test two things to be functional. We do a test called the BOLT test, and it's called the body oxygen level test. It's basically to see how long you could keep a very comfortable breath hold without overdoing it. And you're trying to reach a certain amount of time to be considered quote unquote functional, right? It's like a test. And you'll see also, we'll know that having a low BOLT score is associated with, you could say, health problems. Like could be sleep apnea, or you're always fatigued, or you have breathlessness. So sometimes you may look at a student and they have a hard time breathing. Especially people that maybe they have asthma, or even maybe they got COVID, or they're coming off of a cold. So you see, it's quite common for people to breathe through their mouth, but they're just not aware. But if you make them aware of, hey, close your mouth, breathe through your nose only, they start to access that. And right behind the nose, all the nasal pathways start to open up.
Wow.
Right? And it's also possible that you'll have students that their nose are blocked, and we teach them exercises to unblock their nose so they get access to, you could say, that muscle. You know, when you work out with someone and you say, you teach them a certain activation drill, and they tell you, I've never felt those muscles before.
Yeah.
Or it's been a long time since I felt my lats or my abs or my glutes. You know, and this is the same with the nose. You know, I haven't breathed properly through my nose in a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you slow down your breath, you create through your nose, you create what's called nitric oxide. This is the third component. Because nitric oxide is, it was found, I think, by some German, possibly researchers or scientists, I think in the 90s. And we were actually quite surprised. I think they won a Nobel Prize actually for nitric oxide, and they learned that the body naturally produces it. And what's nice about this is that it kills bacteria and viruses in the nose.
In the nose.
So it's your own way to fight disease.
One of the first barriers of the immune system, for a certain extent.
Through the nose.
Wow.
And nitric oxide gets dispersed through your blood vessels and opens up the smooth muscles, the capillaries, the blood vessels. You create better flow.
Wow.
So people that have high blood pressure, this is very important for blood flow. And it's like a natural form of Viagra. It's crazy. So this is serious. Patrick talks about it. It's the equivalent to taking Viagra for some people.
Wow. So just understanding how important it is to breathe through the nose. First of all, we activate the diaphragm, which a lot of people are not if they are only mouth breathers. And we also get to the chance to harness the full power of our lungs, right?
Yes.
And then what I really want to get a little bit more into, because I understand oxygen, carbon dioxide. I understand it on a surface level. Yet this nitro dioxide, right? You said
nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide. So nitric oxide. How do I have to understand this? If people are learning through exercises or whatever, they learn how to breathe through the nose, they build more nitric oxide, or
correct. Yes, okay. You want a desired amount. Anything more or less will be suboptimal. So if it's too much, it can kill you. Same as oxygen, you know, same as CO2. So you want to find the right balance. You know, we have a lot of oxygen necessary, we need it. But when you have the right amount of, let's say, CO2, everything gets balanced back out. And you're only going to get that by probably breathing less and breathing slowly.
Wow.
And it's like by maintaining this airflow in your lungs very slowly, you're not releasing too much, you're not taking in too much. So it gets a chance to produce it. Wow. That's only when it produces it. When it stays inside and you kind of wave it very slowly. And it's the way we teach people how to breathe. Makes sense?
And it's still a question of, if you always have an elevated stress level, I can see how hard it gets for people to breathe in a way that is beneficial to them. On the contrary, they start breathing faster, quicker.
Very interesting. Which comes first, the stress or the mouth breathing?
Yeah, it's a great question.
So it's like chicken or egg.
Yeah, chicken or egg.
So if by nasal breathing, by going, just doing this technique, which is should be normal, it's gonna calm people down. It's gonna make them more relaxed.
Yeah.
More focused.
Yeah. That's why they say, just breathe in through the nose and relax. Just breathe in. It's to relieve stress, right? Wow. So my question would be, let's take this form of breathing into training. Because what I have learned in training, as far as I'm concerned, is it's always the optimum way to breathe in through the nose. Yet sometimes if you are engaging in a training activity that increases the oxygen debt, right?
Yes.
Then it gets harder to breathe through the nose, right? And then we start naturally breathing through the mouth. So how does that play out?
Yeah, so always depends on, of course, the activity and what pushes you past, let's say, your threshold. And sometimes, you know, your threshold will start forcing you want to breathe through your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But it also depends on the goal. If you're doing a very strenuous activity, some athletes will have no choice but to start breathing through their mouth for performance. If you start breathing through your nose and only, you'll see your performance start to go down. That's normal. But over the long term, it will improve. It will create acid buffers. So be able to buffer acid better through this technique, because the oxygen you'll be able to take in will create energy, ATP, which will buffer the acid, right? So it's only when you have that debt, then it starts accumulating acid and hydrogen ion. But when you start breathing through your nose, you create you create more energy, right? Just by breathing through your nose. That makes sense.
Keep going.
It depends on the activity. It's very, let's say we take kettlebells, for example. If I'm doing a set of kettlebells, I want a certain level of stability, very important. And so I have to breathe through my nose. And I have to create a sort of like a intra-abdominal pressure to protect my spine.
Yeah.
This is very important because of the load.
Yeah.
So safety comes into play, right? If we emphasize safety at all time, then you want to pressurize, you want to keep things tight, you want to engage your abdominals and create that pressure with the air. But if your debt becomes too advanced, if you go too much into fatigue, you'll not be able to stabilize and maintain the quality, and you're going to switch to breathing. So the diaphragm's job comes to two roles: stabilize, breathe, one or the other. They can merge into, it's like a dimmer. You can go into one and still maintain a little bit of the other. That makes sense?
100%. I feel this when I do sets of double jerks, where I have started adjusting my breathing techniques. And when we talk to clients, when we talk about the Valsalva maneuver, we talk about power breathing, we talk about a mixture of the two. And the mixture of the two is where I do when I do sets of jerks. So the exhale part I always emphasize when I'm doing jerks. So it's five breaths. But what I always make sure, in the jerk it's 3 or 4. Just thinking right. So I rack the weights. I got them on in the rack position. I go in a dip and a bump to bring the kettlebell up. But before I do this, I breathe in to create the pressure to stabilize the spine, because I'm going into a position with the kettlebells, especially when they get heavy, where they might be detrimental to the spine. So I have to be very careful. But then I use what you were just saying. Some of it is still I need the supply for oxygen, but I also need pressure and safety.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
The problem happens when you go beyond, let's say, your threshold.
Yeah.
It could be, let's say, a lactic threshold, or your fatigue starts to set in too much, and you lose the ability to maintain that, which you just talked about, the quality.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when recovery comes into play. So nasal breathing during recovery is also quite important, because you will replenish your energy faster. At first, it might be hard because people will want to take in more air, but it's going to slow you down a little bit. It's going to make you kind of focus on relaxation, right? And also lower your heart rate, and then you'll recover much quicker.
Yeah.
But that's a hard part that people don't see.
And that you have.
So I've switched to nasal breathing after, during my recovery. I recover aerobically with my heart's pumping, so I just try to rest by shaking stuff off, shaking my body off.
That's where I've taken a lot of these inputs from you, and you have really changed my perspective on the training mentality that we now even distribute on a larger basis on our clients and people who follow us. And I love Funk Roberts calls this "smell the roses" when he regenerates, and we do this. So it's you stop the activity, and then it's pumping, and you start shaking. We start and from this book, brother. Let me tell you, man, I've read this book, The Way to Live, from Georg Hackenschmidt,
Cool.
and an OG physical culturist from back in the day. And he said, when you are resting in between sets, put the weight down and walk and breathe. And walk and breathe. And I've started incorporating this, and it's so fascinating. It's that walking around, breathing in, relaxing, bringing everything down. Yet, I think it challenges people on the notion of the burn mentality that we always talk about. If you think about you always have to destroy yourself, you think, no, rest doesn't have a place in my training.
The thing is that burn mentality is not intuitive. It's forced.
Oh, I like
So
this.
if you take a more intuitive approach, you work really hard and then you rest hard as well.
You rest hard. I love this.
Yeah, you know, you heard the expression
Rest
work hard, play hard, or so I would say just kind of a play on
Yeah,
expressions here.
rest hard.
It's like work hard and then rest hard as well.
I love this. I love this. This
So
is
you
so
have to
good.
give yourself the you could say generous rest, as Pavel would
Generous
say.
rest. Yes.
Very
Wow.
generous rest period. And by doing this, you can maximize on any quality you're working with. Either it's power, endurance, strength. You're gonna really maximize on it. You know, so yes.
Yeah, and it ties into the idea that I've read on. I don't know which book it was, and I think it was Pavel's book where he said, oh no, it was a video that I watched of him where he said, of course it depends on your goals. So I'm now reading Yuri Verkhoshansky that Pavel Tsatsouline has quoted a lot. Pavel quoted this dude a lot. So I'm reading this book, which is very hard to read, but it's fascinating what's in
For
there.
training,
And special strength training from Yuri Verkhoshansky, and I think I'm almost through. And there's so much. I've written so many notes about this book. This is so fascinating. And one thing that he says is how important it is when we talk about strength. And Pavel echoes this, that strength is not conditioning. So you want to focus on strength, then don't treat it like a conditioning workout or like an endurance workout. It's completely different. You move a lot of, it's just normal. You said it, intuitive. You move a lot of weights, you rest a lot. Because there's a completely different goal.
absolutely.
So if we start mixing things, I think this is where we get it twisted, because we mix things up. We start using 48s and 40 kgs and 32 kgs and whatever have you, and then we do conditioning with it, which may be detrimental in the end. I mean, for people who are really strong, maybe they even need heavier weights, but you get what I'm saying,
I
right?
think, you know, the programming is an art and a science.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes some background. And before you start playing with the numbers and the intensity and the volume, you need to follow some solid plans that have, you know, from people that know their stuff. That's where you'll learn.
Yeah.
And I have experience in that, you know, and I've studied Pavel. I studied other strength teachers as well, but Pavel's one of my favorites, of course. So I get most of my my stuff from him, and he's the most influential. But you know, we can talk about programming. We can talk about,
let's do it. Let's jump right into it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So it really, the programming, as you know, it's like a huge topic, but we lately there's been some new, you could say, methods resurfacing that are, you know, like you talked about Pavel. He's like the renaissance of strength training in a way, kind of bringing the Russian
kettlebell,
the Russian technique back to, you could say, to North America, and then kind of resurfacing. So it's exactly that what you talked about. And he's brought back the anti-glycolytic training, the AGT. It's a system that has been around since the 80s, but he came up with a few subcategories based on strong first principles and what we use with the kettlebell and the different energy systems. So it's really interesting stuff when you dive into it. And a lot of it is based on Verkhoshansky's work, right? Which is, he's actually the pioneer with, he created this. So anti-glycolytic training is really avoiding glycolysis in your workout. So avoiding that burn, avoiding, you could say, the negative effects of glycolysis when you're training. If your rest is not adequate enough, you will eventually go into glycolysis in your workouts. So it has to be tweaked to a certain way based on your capacity, based on your goals, of course. What exercises are you choosing? And for most people, they're doing GPP, which is general physical preparation. This is most people. Then you have athletes. Then you go into sports specific or special physical preparation called SPP. There's also SPP1, SPP2 is more specific. But generally, you want to train your strength and your power. And through that, you'll be able to practice your endurance as well. Because what is endurance? Is the ability to tolerate strength and power over and over and over and over again for the desired amount of time. So it's the ability to maintain that quality of strength and power over time. That's endurance, right? Of course, there's different type of endurance as well. But the A+A, so that's a subcategory of anti-glycolytic training, which stands for lactic plus aerobic. So we use these training protocols where we maximize on our power, but we recover aerobically, right? So aerobic is low power, but it's steady state, kind of like steady state cardio. You know what it is? Kind of like I go jogging or I'm doing like biking, and it's very steady state from my heart. Exactly. So it's training in an interval, really, right? So you push really hard, it's high intensity for a short amount of time, and then I can recover aerobically. It's very easy. It's like, it's doable, it's maintainable, and it feels good. So that's how you replenish. The aerobic system will replenish your creatine phosphate. So you're able to train. The goal of the A+A and the anti-glycolytic training is to make your fast twitch fibers more aerobic. They're stronger, fast twitch fibers, the one that are strongest and most powerful, is to make them aerobic. It's really cool. So we train in a way that it's almost like you could say strength cardio or strength aerobics. It's a very nice way to train, and it maximizes on all, you could say, a lot of the qualities that you need to be generally fit to a very high level, actually. So muscle mass, hypertrophy, you're going to get effects of that. You're going to get endurance, you're going to get strength, you're going to get fat loss, you're going to get cardio, quote unquote.
Touches all bases.
And you do it in a simple way, with just a select few exercises. And the exercises that we choose, they have a highest carryover to most applications. They have the highest impact and make you the most fit, you could say, which we know what are the best movements are compound lifts, the ones we do all the time. we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? But we need to program them in a certain way that's gonna minimize the negative effects of lactic acid, glycolysis. It creates free radicals, and it's been associated with cancer cells as well.
What I think is so fascinating is just pivoting off this word that you said, intuitive. If you feel that your body goes to a level where everything starts to deteriorate, this is a signal that you're not supposed to go any further. So relax. And I just had this conversation yesterday with a few of our clients. So we did renegade rows in a small group. We had renegade rows, we had swing, and we had push-ups. And so I told them, listen, you have to understand these are heavy grind exercises. A renegade row, renegade push-up, and then a heavy swing. So you have to understand these are heavy grinds, and they take a toll on your body, and you have to develop self-responsibility to understand that you need to rest during the session. And so at the end of the session, one of our clients, she comes up to me, she's very new, and she's like, but I was told to always go above and beyond. And that's what I read in Verkhoshansky's book. And it's so fascinating because you talked about the approach that we as coaches take for the general population. This is where we have to get stronger, and if we do it the right way, we also build some solid endurance with it. And our tool is the tool of the trade, is the kettlebell. Great. So what Verkhoshansky is talking about in his book, the special strength training, is so incredibly complex that I even wanted to close the book because I was like, this is confusing. He talks about strength. He talks about static endurance. He talks about dynamic endurance. He talks about explosive,
there's a lot of subcategories.
Explosive strength, explosive reactive ballistic strength. It's like, where's this guy taking us? But I think here's the important point. And he sums it up in a couple of sentences. But what I love what he says is we have to realize that we're talking about high-level athletes who have mastered their craft. And now here comes along the coach who is trying to get the most out of the training session that they have with you as the coach. And then he says, you have to understand that the more advanced the sportsman or the sportswoman is, the less you can do because they are reaching their pinnacle. And I think sometimes we get it mixed up because then we think we have to use these incredibly, you mentioned SPP1, SPP2 exercises. We have to apply them on the general population, which is a fallacy, right?
Yeah, you don't need to be doing curls with a mace, on one leg. Just kidding. But let me ask you a question, Gregory. Just gonna use this as an example. If you take a kettlebell, like a medium heavy kettlebell, and you try to press it, let's take 20 kilo or 24 kilo. How many reps do you think you can do? What would be your maximum?
Time frame or whatever?
No,
just
one shot. Rep max.
Rep max?
Do as many as possible.
As many as possible with a 20 kg?
Yeah, or 24.
24. Maybe, I would say between solid ones 8 and 12.
Okay, good. So let's pick a number. For example, you take 8. Okay. Which would be the best reps of that set?
The first ones.
Would you say? How many? On average.
The best ones, maybe the first 3.
Okay, and which ones would be the worst?
The last ones.
Maybe last 3, right?
Oh yeah, or maybe even depending on who's watching or what I have to do.
Yes. So the Soviet weightlifting methodology, which was used in the 60s all the way up to the 80s, still used today. Their maximum repetition that they would do in a session would be between 1/3 of their maximum to 2/3 of their maximum.
Yeah.
They would not do more.
Yeah, that's great.
So let's say let's say it's your max is 8, or if it's 9, your max rep that you would do in your workout would be 6.
Yeah.
It would be between 3 to 6 reps.
Yeah.
So this has been the best way to train for years, and this methodology has been really unparalleled, almost unbeaten, actually. So Pavel just brought this back with a new system that he came up with based on a lot of the research that he'd done. It's called Plan Strong. Have you ever heard of a powerlifter called Boris Shaiko before? Maybe? But check Boris Shaiko out. Boris Shaiko adapted the weightlifting methodology to powerlifting. And instead of using powerlifting cycles that they use in the West, like American style or West Side barbell, they use more of what's called, so take American style, which is also known as progressive overload. This is most commonly known. But in the East, and the Soviet used variable overload. And variable overload is very different, actually. It doesn't really go up linearly, but it goes into waves and sharp changes. So it's sharp changes in load almost randomly within a week and within a month. It's a very interesting way they trained. And it's a way that they trained almost like we talked about the anti-glycolytic or the A plus A to maximize and get the most quality repetitions by maximizing on intensity and volume, but adapted to that athlete. Wow. It's very cool.
Fascinating.
Very, very interesting stuff. But to plan something like this, it would take a little bit of know-how. So what we would do is we would, let's say, take your military press, let's say your rep max. You could either use one kettlebell or two kettlebells, and you'd have to do a test. So we need to know what's your, let's say, your percentages. And we use different intensity zones, and we would plan it into, let's say, a 4-week block. The way the progression would go, it would be very wavy from week to week. So it doesn't mean it's going to get harder every week, but it might change. It might get easier the next week, and the following week might get even harder than the first week.
And that's on a random basis, or is that pre-planned?
It looks random, but it's actually quite calculated. You have to take the total volume that you would do in a month of presses. Right? So let's say you add up all the presses you do in 1 month. Every rep counts. And we call that number of lips.
Wow. And
then you would, let's say, divide that into weeks, but not equally. Right? You would, we call them the magic numbers. So there's 4 numbers. So let's say if you divide a month into 4 weeks, if you divide them equally, instead of like you take 100%, it would be 25% every week. Every week.
Yeah, same.
But using the Soviet numbers, they would be 15 at the low end, 22, 28, and then 35.
Wow.
There's a minimum of 20% jump between each week. And we call that the Delta 20 principle. That's just the linear fashion, but there's about 30 variations. And every variation is different. So you can start, let's say, with 28%. Next week is going to be 15%. Then it's going to be 35%. Then it's going to be 22%. So it goes up in a wave, up and down like that. And that's called the Delta 20. So we use this method of waving the load at strong first. And Pavel used this in the quick and the dead for the endurance.
Here we go.
And how do we train in the quick and the dead? We basically use the Delta 20 principle to guide us into the daily volume. So what type of volume are we doing for that day? Right? So we take 100 swings, and we either do, let's say for a day, we either do, for example, a total of 40 swings, 60 swings, 80 swings, or 100 swings. And what's cool about the quick and the dead is Pavel, in order to get that randomness, you roll the die. So you roll the die, whatever number you get on the die that shows, for example, you get 3, then you would do 60 swings. You get 6, you do 100 swings. And make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. But let's just put it in a practical way, and just so I can really get the full gist of it and everybody that's listening. Let's say my swinging weight now is, first of all, thanks to your coaching, and then I put in some reps. I really feel comfortable with the 48 kg now. I really do feel comfortable. I love the intensity. I love I used to feel a harder and sharper drop in gravity, so I always started bending my knees a bit. So this is where I kind of caught the weight, and now I feel my hips are strong enough that I don't even have to start bending. So with the 48 kg, I really feel comfortable. So let's put that in perspective with the quick and dead. 48 kg, and take it from there.
The Q and D is designed for power maximization. So 48 might not be the ideal load, ideal weight.
Too heavy? Too heavy.
Might be too heavy.
Okay.
But you can do other programs. Something like A plus A program is going to be slightly different than Q and D.
Okay, then let's take your Q and D, and I'm just using 32. or whatever.
Q&D is what we call the repeat sprint ability. Okay, so repeat sprint ability is very intense, short duration, and then we maximize on the rest period in order to repeat that. So Pavel designed this power program, which basically, talks about being powerful. It's really awesome. It has many what the hell effects. It's really great as far as health-wise and GPP and even being an athlete. So you want to be powerful because you have if you focus on power, you will get a mix, you could say, different qualities from cardio, endurance, also strength, right? So to take, let's say, a sprinter's approach, would you be a marathon runner or powerlifter or a sprinter? Sprinter has kind of, you could say, is right in the middle, right?
It's a mixture.
So strong, but also really fast, right? Can endure, right? It's kind of you could say best of both worlds. So this is the Q&D. And I love the name. I love the title because he says you either quick or you're dead. Like in nature. If you're in nature, you're either a predator or you're a prey. You fall victim to a jaguar, you're dead meat. So like in nature, in the jungle, he uses the example of two cats. He has the cat which does his kill in like 0.5 seconds. And then you have the cat that drags his tail. He's a little older, he's beaten up, takes him a little longer to get his kill. And he says that that's the person training at the gym right now that's doing the Metcons and the HIIT training. They're like dragging their tail and they're like, it's hard for them. They're like persistent hunters. And they're not, you could say, the supreme cat or the supreme predator.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, it comes down to efficiency, right? I mean, use your power, your strength, your endurance, whatever you have, use it as efficient as possible.
Correct.
Instead of and see, it always ties back into this idea that Pavel is really trying to give across is this, guys, it's cool, heavyweight is cool, high intensity is cool, but we have to understand, first of all, programming. Now I love what you said. You have, if you go into realms like these, quick and dead or whatever, then you have to understand that you have to follow the professional in order to really get the benefits of the program. You can't just throw numbers out there and then expect results, right?
Correct.
So that's the first thing that we have to understand. And the second thing that we have to understand is if we are always going balls to the walls without recuperation, and even Verkhoshansky says this in his book, if you keep working out, training throughout the week, you destroy your body's recuperative systems.
Yeah, you stay in the catabolic phase for too long, and you may not even be anabolic.
Yeah.
This is the problem. What people don't realize, you have the anabolic effect. So the greater the load, the longer the catabolic effect. Okay. How long you will stay catabolic, it depends on your recovery, how you can recover. Then you go into anabolism, which is the ability to recover and regenerate and have that super compensation, get stronger, and then adapt to that load. Right? It's like the strong medicine, or you could say a little bit of poison, you kind of become immune to that dosage. So the Q&D program, what is interesting about it is that it maximizes on power generation. But to be honest, Gregory, this is, you could say, a true high intensity training program. It is a true program that minimizes,
I get it. Yeah, I get
that
it.
really minimizes the glycolytic effect. So Pavel calls it by a different name because he hates HIIT. So he calls it repeat sprint ability. And this is the way athletes train to be very intense. It's very intense for a short duration of time. And then you have, you could say, not full recovery, but enough recovery to be able to repeat that intensity. Because if you take, let's say, a program where it's too intense, you keep going, you will eventually slow down.
No.
And that's not the goal. This is what you're gonna adapt to, is slowing down. You don't want that. You want to maintain speed. So make sure you stop before you slow down. Otherwise, your body will adapt to the last stimulus. Makes sense?
It ties into what I'm reading in the book from Verkhoshansky, where he talks about starting strength, and then he talks about speed strength. He talks about so many things. I've written so many notes. But what I think is so fascinating in that regard is understanding for example, the fighter's gene or the fighter's ability. The fighter is continuously working with relatively small loads, but he has to be incredibly quick with the firing of the muscle fibers. They have to be boom like this, right? And that's what I understand. And what I understand also is that when we talk about, for example, the program Q&D is high intensity done the right way, and I would even put it a step further, high intensity done the right way for a specific goal, right? So it's probably not for everybody who's not looking for that specific goal that Pavel lays out in the program, which is, and I'm getting this vibe from Verkhoshansky as well, where he says a good trainer or a good coach experiments and finds out what cycle the athlete has to be in. So maybe now we have the cycle of static strength. Then we have
sorry to interrupt. You have to have certain prerequisites.
Yeah.
For example, to be, you have to have a base of strength, and ties into being strong first. And this is what how we train beginners. We focus on strength first. Once you have a decent amount of strength, then you can transfer that strength into power. You can start producing power. So Q&D is not for everyone. It's, you could say, for a little more. You have to be a little more advanced to know this. In order to go fast, you have to be strong, right? This is why he selected certain exercises that you for that person that knows how to do it, they can produce that power and go fast. So the way I perform my swings in Q&D, it's with the overspeed eccentric.
Yeah.
It's by going faster in my swing or in my snatch.
This is tough.
So there's the float at the top. I don't wait very long. I swing hard and I pull the bell down between my legs very fast, as hard as I can. And I power back up.
That's powerful.
And I do that for 5 to 10 repetitions. It doesn't last very long. It lasts like, between 8 to 15 seconds maximum. But at the end of my set, I am really trying to get air in, because it was very intense. Right, so I breathe through my nose. I trained myself to just breathe through my nose and okay, relax.
The roses.
Wait till your next set. Before I used to breathe through my mouth, so I'd be But if you breathe through your nose, you'll find recovery is better, and you can slow it down, and you'll be ready faster for your next set. If you're on like a time, like in that program. And there's many ways to plan it. I just like Q&D for its simplicity, for its effectiveness, for its efficiency. Because my main workout, if I just follow that plan, it's between 12 and 30 minutes, 3 times a week, and I get to be very fit. I get to be very fit for at least
everything you need.
My least investment in time.
Yeah.
Can I do other stuff as well? Yes, absolutely. He says in the book, this allows you to do other things. You can still be a power lifter and then keep this, you could say, on the side and use this as, let's say, your warm up, or you could say maybe a cardio program if you don't do any cardio, if you're a power lifter, right?
And isn't it true that that's when people ask us, right? You get the question probably as well. I'm sure you get the question, hey Louka, I'm doing X, Y, Z, and can I do kettlebell as well? And so what I tend to say is general population. I think for most people who are advanced, is maybe some of us have to understand that we need to dial it down a little bit. we are working out too much or working out too hard or doing too much. Spinning class 5 times a week. When can I do kettlebells? Right?
Either that or not enough. Like,
yeah, and then the other side,
even
which is the bigger side, the bigger set of things is people don't do enough. Yeah, I get that as well. Yet,
the problem is people are stuck in different speeds. Like Pavel would say, either you're stuck in first gear or stuck in sixth gear. They don't know how to change gears and to go into second, third, gears. Fourth, because people don't do enough or they do too much. They go all out, or they're sitting down eating something while they're doing, leg extension, right?
Most definitely.
You're having your burger and you're spinning your bike, so it's like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
So it's like,
and we're stuck in these gears. That's one thing, and then we have to understand, even if we switch gears, we have to understand when and how long. There's a time for everything. What I started incorporating, for example, now is static strength. Because I'm reading from Verkhoshansky's book, where he says, with the static strength, when you do isometric work, right? You push or you pull or whatever you do, whatever muscle you're trying to engage in. Now I'm using power bands for this, which I think is a great addition. So, for example, before I start my bench, because I got back on the bench with the barbell, I want to get stronger again with the barbell. So I'm doing this, boom. Keeping the tension for 8 seconds, it almost fries your brain. That's why he says you don't do enough of this. Yeah, because it's neurological. That's what it is. Ciao, mother. Cheers. So we have to understand that everything has a place in time. And why do people need static strength? I would say the general population, probably not. Just do dynamic exercises and have fun with it. But if you want,
Gregory, is you can give them basic stuff.
Yeah.
Because you could say static strength is also used in dynamic strength in certain ways. If you're doing a deadlift, your upper body is in a static isometric contraction.
Most definitely.
If you're doing a swing, the top of the swing is a very short held standing plank.
Most definitely.
So they need to learn those basic things. But when you get a little more advanced, you can dive a little bit deeper, like you're going with the bands or with different resistance. And you can use them in different ways into your programming. Right. So it's a very nice way to train. So you could say there's different levels. There's different benefits. You don't, at a beginner, you don't want to overwhelm them with too many things. So a thing like a basic plank, where you're teaching them how to engage properly. And how to maintain the neutral spine, the pressure, how to create that static tension, isometric hold. That's, I would say, for a beginner, that would be important.
100%. And what you were saying, there's so much truth in it. I mean, even Verkhoshansky, he says, people are, when you are using weights, even in a dynamic way, you have yielding, then you have holding, and then you have overcoming. So these 3 phases, they're always part of it. And you gave a great example with the deadlift. And then we have to understand, yes, this is part of the game, but if you want to take it a step further and then have some specific goals where I want to increase my bench, I want to increase my squat, I want to be better with my long cycle and all that kind of stuff, then I use these different methods. But this is where I'm now, and I'm so glad I'm reading this book, because it opens up it expands my horizon on one part. When we talk about highly trained and skilled athletes. Yet in many cases, it is not applicable when we talk about the general population. And that's where we mix it up, like I mentioned before.
One thing you have to realize, these like advanced techniques and methods, they're a power tool. You don't want to overdo them. You want to apply them in like strategic dose. So if you do them all the time, you're going to plateau very quickly. And the results are going to stall. So every once in a while, like maybe once a month or something like this, could be a great idea, very favorable. We call them overloads. Where you can overload with a weight, or do what's called force feeding the tension forward, feeding the tension forward. That means that the tension comes within internally. And I imagine that I'm holding it or using a very heavy load. So we use these in calisthenics. When you say we do a plank or a one-arm push-up or a hold, it could be a planche, it could be front lever or back lever or any type of like flag, you've seen them do it, where you're holding your body in a very strong and isometric way. So this is feeding the tension forward, is what we teach.
Awesome.
Right? From within. So you try to contract as hard as possible. And we apply these to using barbell, kettlebell as well. You know, so there's a lot of applications, but it needs a little bit of know-how and how to do it.
It needs massive amounts of know-how. I mean, if what you're describing is what I'm reading now in Verkhoshansky, because I get these confirmations that he says an athlete will step up differently to the bar, and they have analyzed this. The athlete will step up differently to the bar if he knows it's heavyweight, or he gets the cue, heavyweight. The state of the mind changes. He gets the cue, lightweights. State of mind changes.
Yes.
And that's it's so fascinating for me to see that. And the beauty of it all is when we have these theoretical this wealth of knowledge that you and I are getting in, we also have the luxury of working with people in real life, and then you see it play out in real life. What you talked about, the breathing, is what I see with people in real life when we start training. They have a hard time, and you mentioned or you remember in the podcast, in the Lebe podcast, where Steve mentioned how important breathing is, right? And when people have a hard time breathing, and then you slowly progress them towards breathing right, and then you slowly progress them towards understanding their body, the neurological connections. Like you said this, I never felt this muscle. Yeah, but you have it. But you probably never even talked with it, right? You never had you never have a conversation with it. So that's why I think it's important. It proves again that even with these basic maneuvers, it leads a huge amount of know-how.
Yeah, absolutely. But start slow. Do one thing at a time. Do it very well, and then move on to the next thing. I'd rather go the course of mastery before being too much of a generalist.
Most definitely. So you talked about moving on. Let's dedicate a couple of more minutes to the rite of passage.
Cool.
What is the rite of passage, first of all? Because there are a lot of people who are watching who don't know what rite of passage is.
Yeah.
And what it's all about.
So there's an expression in Russia that the rite of passage from boy to man is pressing a 32 kilo overhead with one arm. And Pavel talks about it. But it's a program that Pavel summarized. He wrote a book called Enter the Kettlebell in 2005. It's actually that old, 2005. Was it 2005? I believe 2005. I believe that's either 2005 or 2009. I'll double check with you later. But it's you could say a follow-up to the program minimum. So if you read Pavel's work, his first book was called The Russian Kettlebell Challenge. All right. And then from there, in this book, he talks about what's called a program minimum, which is just doing a few things very well. Yep. And in that book, he has 2 exercises that you can focus on to get maximum results, which he has the snatch. He calls it the tsar of the kettlebell lifts.
Yeah, I love this.
And then he has the bench press. And the bench press is also the king of lifts as well, right? I think it was Sigmund Klein that used to do a lot of bench presses, and he called it the king of lifts. So it's a really wonderful program. But in that book, after writing it, and creating the RKC and the cert, he realized that this program is not for most people. People don't have the overhead mobility to do snatch or even
the bench press.
Bench press, forget about it. It's advanced,
forget
right?
about it. Yeah.
So he wrote Enter the Kettlebell, which is a little, you could say, simpler version or easier version. And in this book, you have to have the prerequisites of doing swings and your get-ups. This is a prerequisite. That is, you could say, the new program minimum. The new program minimum is doing your kettlebell swings, knowing how to do them, either 2 arm and 1 arm, and then the get-up. Okay. But in that book, in enter the kettlebell. Pavel, and you've seen the video, and I saw your video that you.
A legendary video. Yeah.
And he talks about doing the get up any safe way you can, right? There's no necessarily technique or specific way, step by step. He just says, get up any safe way you can. However you do it is your business, right? And then I think that's what the get up was back in the day. Is just get up anyhow you can in a safe way with a weight overhead, right? And eventually we kind of, as the RKC, we developed the technique, break it down into these steps, right? And that became simple and sinister. Now, the enter the kettlebell focuses on the snatch and the clean and press. But as a prerequisite, you must have the swing and the get up, called the program minimum. Then after the program minimum, or PM, is the rite of passage, which has you focus on clean and press with the kettlebell and the snatch, right? Those two lifts, that's it. And of course, you can have your variety days. You can do a few other lifts. You can practice your cleans, your squats. You can also do pull-ups in the program, he says, with your clean and presses. So it's a plan that uses the ladder system, right? You could say the Russian ladder. So it's kind of like clusters of reps, right? A ladder would be like, for example, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, and then you repeat. So it's taking. Remember what I told you at the beginning, that buffer that you have with reps, like either that 1 to 2/3 of your max.
Quality.
The ladders work perfect for this, because you're never going to your max in your sets ever. You're just building a lot of volume. So let's say you take your 8 rep max that you told me before, and you would do ladders of 1 rep left, 1 rep right. Take a break. 1 rep, 2 on your left, 2 on your right. Take a break. Then it's 3 and 3, right? Then you work up. You do this many times.
It's great.
You do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 many times. And the progression then is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you build up doing that several times until you reach, let's say, a certain amount of ladders, and then you can increase your kettlebell size. So it's a surefire way of building your strength, your endurance also, without burning out, and then achieving your goal.
Great.
It works really well.
So that's the rite of passage, right?
Correct.
All right.
Afterwards, you do the kettlebell snatch and also mixed in with swings.
So the rite of passage is a certain description of a set of exercises and training in the books that
it's a program.
All right.
This is the program. It's basically focus is clean and press and snatch.
Yeah.
That's it.
So that's
most of Pavel's program. It's only 2 exercises.
Yeah,
pretty much all of his books.
Yeah.
You have Power to the People, The Naked Warrior, Simple
Pistol
and Sinister,
squat and one arm push up. Yeah.
Yep.
It's so great. It's so great. And I love what he said. And I took this. I'm taking so much from him. Where he said and what I love about Pavel, I just had this conversation with somebody else, and I said, what we sometimes forget about Pavel is, I mean, we all know when you look at Pavel, he has this persona, which some of it you know him personally, but maybe some of it has been the marketing idea back in the day from RKC. He carries it over, which is totally fine. But we have to understand that he always credits other people throughout all of his books. There's so many names in these books, and he quotes he says the pistol squat and the one-arm push-up is the body weight equivalent of the power lifts, but he credits this to somebody else. That's what he always does. It's communal learning. It's learning from everybody, and then you're the guy, the mediator, right, putting it together. And even in Joe Rogan's podcast, when you listen to him speak, it's like, I talk about this dude, this guy, this dude, this gal. He always takes the ideas, puts them together, and then he lets you have it, which is such a great quality. And sometimes we miss this. It's like people treat him like, he's a god. Well, he's actually a mediator. He listened, he read, he practiced, and then he pushes the ideas forward.
The nice thing about Pavel is that he will do the research for you, and he will kind of, you could say, transfer the knowledge in a very easy to understand way, or easier to understand way. Especially like the textbooks from Russia and a lot of the stuff you cannot get here. There's no way There's no one else doing it but him, taking that information and bring it here. So we're getting it directly through him, right? And a lot of the stuff was kept secret.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't want us to know.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's so much truth in this. I see this with ordering. I ordered 2 books. I ordered one I downloaded from Verkhoshansky, this special strength training that I can send to you if you want it. Which you said it's highly difficult to read. It's English, but it's difficult to understand. And then as I'm reading through it, I'm like, I gotta slap my own description on it, so I fully understand it, because this guy is, one sentence has like 10 words, and so you got break it down into 3 or 4 so that you understand, okay, this is what he means and this is where he comes from. And so I ordered another Verkhoshansky's book from one of our Swiss suppliers, and I don't know how long I have to wait. They say, well, it releases someday in May, but I don't know when.
I have to translate it first before I send it to you.
Yeah, yes, yes, but that's what Pavel did. So you're gathering the information, you're gathering the knowledge, and then you said it. It's a knowledge transfer. That's what I've heard. That's what we've seen. That's how stuff works, and let's put it forward. And you know what's fascinating about Verkhoshansky, and this is where I'm getting Pavel's idea, because Verkhoshansky talks about the shock method, where he says when the muscle gets a preliminary sharp stretch and then immediately goes into overcoming, this stimulates your neural reserves in a way that no other training equipment does.
Right.
And he does
that with kettlebells though.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because he talks about the jumping around, right? The squat jumps. And Pavel then translates this into the kettlebell swing, which is such a great move, man. It's such a great move.
Yeah, people need to do this.
Yeah, and we have to understand. I mean, you know, in the kettlebell world, we sometimes get things mixed up, and then it's like, well, you know, not everything that guy X says is true, but it's not about everything being true. It's about somebody being a mediator.
Correct.
Transferring knowledge, and then we have to apply. Even Verkhoshansky says this in his book. He says we need more data, but experienced coaches have to experiment. We have to try things out
without killing the athletes.
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely.
But, you know, thanks to you as well for bringing it out and educating more people. You know, it's there's a lot of misinformation out there as well as a lot of information.
Yeah.
So do your own research. Even though, you know, even one of us talk about something, do your own research and follow up. You know, do your due diligence and check it out. Don't just listen to us talking about it, but check out the sources and the resources. Sometimes it's hard to find the sources that Pavel talks about, but he's a trusted figure in the industry. So for me, most of the stuff he says, I'll just take his word for it. And
yeah, and you have every right to do so in most cases, because he built an empire, or like I said, he's the guy who brought the modern renaissance to kettlebells on the back of satisfied customers. So we can take his word, or at least what I just now do with the people that I respect and that I admire is I always listen.
Yeah.
I always listen. And you know what? And that's just fascinating. And I know I've asked you many times, or I've asked many people who were on the podcast, but I always ask the same question. And I ask it again, but differently now. Now that I'm seeing, or that I'm reading about Verkhoshansky, it is so fascinating how he talks about strength, how he talks about the different types of strength, and how he talks about, for example, you mentioned this as well, is you have to build strength first. This is your first base, strong first, right? Most definitely. And then he goes on to say that for an advanced athlete, the heavy lifts are maybe not always good. They may even be detrimental to in some cases. And of course, depending on context-specific goals, what is the goal of the athlete? We have to understand what type of strength does the person need? And he talks about experimenting. And he shows some exercises in the book where I'm like, what? Wow. But I do get where he comes from. For example, one thing that I have to just demonstrate real quick, if I can do it to the best of my knowledge, is he says, for example, a runner or a sprinter. When you see, and I always picture Usain Bolt. When Usain Bolt is running, it looks like this. He has one leg in the air and the other one's like this. He takes these huge leaps because he has these big legs, right? These long legs. So Verkhoshansky says we have to adapt to this huge range of motion that the leg is traveling. And in order to build strength in that whole amplitude, you have to do exercises that go into that fit that amplitude. So for example, one exercise, he has the athlete laying on an incline bench, and one of his leg is hanging down, and then the guy has to come up with his stabilizing leg on the bench and pushes his leg that is loose up into the air and almost stand up like this.
Nice.
And the guy has to do it with weights to increase the amplitude, right? To work the full amplitude. So I'm reading this and I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. And then I take it back to what Dan John is telling me. Dan John says, listen, we're confusing it, or I'm just paraphrasing, but he's so into basic strength. He's so into basics that he's like, you know, back in the day when I was younger, I would tinker with these new thoughts or with these ideas, and now I'm like, most of it seems to be garbage. That's not what he's saying, but I'm just paraphrasing. So then I think about Dan John. That's why I got to talk to him again, because this is like two worlds colliding. You have Verkhoshansky, who comes up with these incredibly special type exercises, and then you have a Dan John who's also a trusted source who says,
yeah,
the big lifts work.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you make out of this?
I'm sure those athletes are doing the big lifts as well. The people that you're talking about in the Verkhoshansky, they're not just doing that highly specialized exercise.
Yeah.
But it's the 80-20 principle. You're going to get 80% of your results from the 20% of core lifts that you do. And the other 80% are just, you could say, cherry on top, right? So you could do all these little assistance lifts that they do in like West Side Barbell and stuff. It works because they're super strong and they're there. They need that little stimulation because they're at such a high level. They're almost at we call it the edge of their, you could say, not limitation, but the edge of their genetic potential. So the closer you are at the edge of your genetic potential, the more you have to create that stimulus or that adaptation where you have to change the exercise very frequently and be specific on the stuff that you teach them. But most people will never reach that edge.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Let alone try to climb it.
Yeah.
So you just give them the basic lifts that work, that Dan does, and you and I, that we do and we teach.
Most definitely.
Which most people will get that GPP from. Yeah. And you will still be able to perform at decent levels in your sport as well.
Yeah, it's you know, when you read, it's so true what you're saying. Just when I'm reading that type of book, I'm getting, probably there's a new world that is opening up on the strength sports. That's why it's called special strength sport, right?
Correct.
On that level where it's like, wow, it's almost blowing my mind, because I'm like, guys, just do swings, press, get up, deadlift, and you're fine. Yet elite athletes probably have to take it to an extent where it's like, yeah, maybe they got to do the cherry on top. Yet when you read Verkhoshansky's book, it looks like this is not the cherry on top. This is the basis, right? But then again, I'm reading an article from Michael Jordan's trainer, where he says, listen, man, this guy is so incredibly gifted, so my job was to get the last remaining 1.5%. And what did we do? We make the best time out of it. Hill sprints, deadlifts, press, jumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like Dan will talk about this, but not compromising that athlete with stupidity, with exercise that do not relate and will make them worse.
I love this.
So Don't do anything you're not supposed to. Just be careful with it. That's why I think, in a sense, you could say, not say against, but he has a thing like we shouldn't be doing heavy get-ups with athletes that if they drop that kettlebell, they can get hurt.
Yeah.
Right. That's why it's like the get-up is not the most optimal lift for them, or doing it heavy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a get-up is a nice functional movement. Mm-hmm. But again, what's the you could say the pros and cons, or is it worth it for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a funny story about when I shared this, or when Dan John shared this with me, that most people don't need heavy get-ups. And then people started commenting on our channel and was like, or just started sending me messages like, hey bro, why are you still doing heavy get-ups? I'm like, well, because I like them. Yeah, but Dan John said we're not supposed to do them. I'm not like, yeah, and I love Dan John. I respect him, but I just love them. Oh, really? But
it depends how heavy is heavy, Greg.
What is heavy?
People will, you'll say, people will, I guess, relate to a word differently than someone else will. Or will interpret it differently.
Almost.
So maybe in their head, heavy is like super heavy, 1 rep max. I'm going to try to lift as heavy as possible. But heavy for me is different. Like for me, a heavy weight is something that I can do repeatedly. It's comfortable heavy.
Oh, I love it.
But not max heavy where I have to destroy myself and then try to break my arm, or if I drop it, I may drop it, or like we do those stupid things once in a while. But Dan John says that's not safe, of course. But it's not safe to do any lift. Of course, a get up, you have it over your head. But if you have a very heavy barbell on your back, then you might hurt your back. Mm-hmm. If you try to deadlift a very heavy barbell, you might hurt your back as well. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
you have to do things within reason. You have to do things within reason and maintain that quality of technique. Yeah. We have a technical max effort, or if you're doing, let's say, a competition, then athletes, they go all out. Yeah. They do whatever they need to get there. It doesn't matter if they get injured. They want to win. It's
different. That's why somebody recently said, he was like, I don't think it's the best way to say train like an athlete, because most people don't have to train like athletes. Sure. No, you have to treat like everyday people. And what do everyday people do? They carry, they walk, they lift, they push, they pull. That's what's up.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Brother, I always enjoy talking to you, man. It's like I'm talking to an old friend.
It's an honor, man.
It's an honor for me, my man. It's awesome.
The world of kettlebells is dominated by 2 training styles called hardstyle and kettlebell sport. Although vastly different in nature, they have been proven to work and give you the most bang for your buck whenever you pick up a kettlebell, if you apply the technique correctly and are able to differentiate between the two. Now, for beginners, this task might be understandably confusing. With our upcoming hybrid style masterclass, in 100 lessons, you will embrace the emergence of the hybrid style movement, where you will learn how to combine the best of both worlds and become a master at handling the kettlebell. Join the next revolution in kettlebell training now and sign up for our early birds list to stay up to date and receive an exclusive discount in release week. Link is in the description.